Hello, and welcome back to Mammalian Anatomy at Keuka College. We're going to be starting our section on the eye, and this section is going to be a continuation of Chapter 16, the special senses. The eye is a very important organ in humans and many other organisms. In humans, about 70% of our sensory receptors are going to be located in the eye, and about 40% of our cerebral cortex is going to be dedicated to processing visual information. So as you can see, a significant portion of how we understand the external environment is going to be through our sense of sight or vision. The eyes are capable of seeing color, bright and dim light, motion, and even allowing us to understand the three-dimensional structure of the world using stereoscopic vision. But before we get into the eye itself and its physiology, let's look at the accessory structures that surround the eye. Accessory structures have a number of different functions, mainly protection, but it also can allow our eyes to move. So here what we're going to do is we're going to look at the eyebrows, the eyelids, the conjunctiva, the lacrimal apparatus, which produces tears, and the extrinsic eye muscles. There are two categories of eye muscles: extrinsic, which are going to be located on the outside of the eye and are going to help our eyes move, and intrinsic muscles, which are going to be located on the inside of the eye, which helps focus light. So first we're going to talk about the eyebrows. The eyebrows are composed of coarse hair that are superior to the eyes, and its functions are going to be to shade the eyelids from sunlight, and it also protects the eyes from perspiration. So when we're sweating, the eyebrows will catch the sweat and direct the sweat away from our eyes. Eyebrows also play an important role in facial expression and aid in nonverbal communication. Now let's talk about the eyelids. So the anatomical term for eyelids is palpebrae. And what I'd like to first do is look at the superficial features of the palpebrae. So here what we can see is that we have a superior eyelid and an inferior eyelid, and there is a gap in between the two. This gap is called the palpebral fissure, and the palpebral fissure will decrease in size when we close our eyes. On either side, we're going to have the lateral and medial canthus, so the lateral and medial canthus. And what they're going to do is these are going to be the angles of the eyelids, and this is where the two eyelids will actually come together. Within the medial canthus, there's going to be an interesting structure called the lacrimal caruncle, located here and here. This is a specialized piece of skin that can produce secretions that will moisten the eye and create a mucus-like fluid that will cover the eye. Fun fact, when we sleep, sometimes these secretions can dry out and create the little kind of sand that forms in the corner of our eyes when we wake up. This is where the myth of the Sandman came in kind of that mythology. The Sandman will come in while people are sleeping and deposit sand into their eyes, and this will allow the person to sleep well and to dream. And so that's where that kind of mythology came into being. So it's a nice way to kind of link mythology and physiology together. Also, this is evolutionarily interesting. The lacrimal caruncle is a vestigial trait in humans that used to be a third eyelid. Other organisms, such as cats and reptiles, have a third eyelid, which is associated with the lacrimal caruncle. And so when cats close their eyes, what will happen is their superior and inferior eyelids will come together, and their third eyelid will actually sweep across the surface of their eye as well. So kind of wiping the eye in addition to that. So other organisms would actually have a third eyelid, but we no longer have that. There's another feature that some populations have. It's called an epicanthal fold. An epicanthal fold is a phenotypic characteristic that is a very common in people of Asian ancestry and Native American ancestry. It's a fold that would actually cover the medial epicanthus. So it's just another trait that can be found in the eyes. Let's now look at the deep features of the eyes, or the eyelids. So when we look at the deeper structures of the eyelids, we'll see that the eyelids are composed of tarsal plates. These are stiff plates made out of connective tissue, and these plates are covered in skin to form our eyelids. These plates actually create the curvature of our eyelids and play an important role as an attachment point for muscles, particularly the orbicularis oculi. Let's talk about those muscles in a little bit more detail. So there are two major muscles that I'd like to talk about that are associated with the eyelids. There's the orbicularis oculi and the levator palpebrae superioris. Over here we have the orbicularis oculi, but it has been cut. Normally the orbicularis oculi would actually go around the entire structure of the eye in a circular shape. That circular shape is reflected in its name, orbicularis, meaning a circular muscle, oculi referring to the eye itself. So its name specifically translates to the circular muscle that surrounds the eye. And this muscle will originate in the frontal bone and the maxilla, and insert into the tarsal plates of the eyelid. And when this muscle contracts, it will allow our eyes to close. Over here, what's going to happen is we have the levator palpebrae superioris. Levator means to lift up. And so really what this name translates to is the muscle that will lift up the superior eyelid. This muscle is composed of both skeletal muscle and smooth muscle. The skeletal muscle will allow us to voluntarily open our eyes, and the smooth muscle will contract to prevent the eyelid from drooping. So be familiar with these two muscles associated with the eyelids. The next accessory structure that I'd like to talk about is the conjunctiva. The conjunctiva is a thin mucous membrane that is going to coat the internal portion of the eyelid, and it's going to also cover the whites of the eye, or the sclera of the eye. So let's look at it. So here we have the eyelid. If the skin is going to cover the outside of the eyelid, the conjunctiva is going to cover the inside of the eyelid. It's going to loop around over here, connecting the eyelid directly to the eye. And then the conjunctiva will continue onto the surface of the eye, specifically onto the sclera of the eye, the whites of the eye. The conjunctiva will not cover the cornea. The cornea has a special function of allowing light to enter the eye and to refract or bend the light to aid in focusing the light onto the retina. So the cornea has to remain clear as possible, so the conjunctiva isn't going to be located on the cornea. There are different regions of the, there are going to be different regions of the conjunctiva. The part that's going to be connecting to the eyelid is called the palpebral conjunctiva. And the part that connects to the eye itself is the bulbar conjunctiva. When we close our eyelids, it'll create like a sac on the inside of, or in the space between our eyelids and our eye, and we call this the conjunctival sac. This conjunctiva can get infected with bacteria and viruses and cause inflammation. That inflammation is called conjunctivitis, or in layman's terms, pink eye, and it's a very contagious infection of the eye. The next structure that we'll talk about is the lacrimal apparatus. Lacrimal refers to weep, and this will actually produce the lacrimal fluid or the tears. The tears over here will be produced by the lacrimal gland, and the lacrimal gland will excrete those tears onto the surface of the eye using the excretory ducts located here, or the tear ducts. The tear ducts. The tears will actually go across the surface of the eye and kind of coat the eye. And what will happen is those tears will eventually drain into the nasal cavity. There is a little opening here and here called the lacrimal punctum. It is difficult to see on this diagram, but if you take the opportunity to look in the mirror and pull your lower eyelid down, you'll see the lacrimal punctum within the mirror. The tears will drain into the lacrimal punctum and into the canaliculus. The canaliculus will carry the tears into the lacrimal sac, and the lacrimal sac will eventually become the nasal lacrimal duct, or the nasal lacrimal duct. And what will happen is those tears will drain into the inferior meatus, the curve that is located below the inferior nasal conchae. And so it will drain into the nasal cavity. So if you've ever had a really, really good cry and all of that snot is coming out of your nose, most of that stuff is actually your tears draining into your nasal cavity. What I'd like you to know for this section is to be able to label these structures on a diagram and be able to describe the movement of tears from the nasal, from the lacrimal gland to the nasal canal. So what are some of the structures or some of the functions of the lacrimal apparatus? They are to moisten the eyes using the tears, and so they'll keep the eyes moist and prevent it from getting irritated. It will also flush out irritants, so anything that comes into contact with the eye, like dust particles and things like that, it will get washed away. But the tears also play an important role in immunity of the eyes. Tears will actually contain antibodies that will attack different pathogens, and it will also contain an enzyme called lysozyme. Lysozyme is a protein that acts as an antibiotic that will destroy bacteria that come in contact with the eye. So the lacrimal apparatus plays a really important role in protecting the eyes. The last type of accessory structure that I'd like to talk about is the extrinsic muscles of the eye. On the outside of the eye, there are 6 muscles, 4 rectus muscles, meaning 4 straight muscles, and 2 oblique muscles that will attach to the eye at an angle. So these muscles will actually originate in the walls of the orbit and specifically near the common tendinous ring, and they will insert into the sclera of the eye, so the whites of the eye. And when they contract, they're going to be able to move the eye around. So let's talk about these different muscles and what do they do. So we have 4 rectus muscles, 4 straight muscles, and they are going to be described based on their location relative to the eye. Here we have the superior rectus muscle. It is going to be a straight muscle that is above the eye. And its job is to elevate the eye. So it's going to help us look up. And it also will turn the eye medially to some degree, like so. Then we have the inferior rectus muscle as well. And the inferior rectus muscle is going to depress the eye, and it's going to help turn the eye medially as well. So move the eye medially. Because they attach, even though they are a straight muscle, they attach at a very slight angle to the eye. Here we have the lateral rectus muscle. The lateral rectus muscle will allow us to move our eyes laterally, so it'll allow us to look side to side. And here we have the medial rectus muscle that will move our eyes medially, so it will help the eyes turn towards our nose. So look up, look down, side to side. Then we have 2 oblique muscles that attach to the eye at a significant angle. So we can see here we have the inferior oblique, and here is a small portion of the superior oblique, at least the tendon of the superior oblique located here. It kind of goes underneath the superior rectus muscle. They are weird muscles and they cause weird actions. Funnily enough, the superior oblique muscle depresses the eye, so it makes you look downwards, and it's going to turn the eye laterally. And over here, we have the inferior oblique muscle. It's going to elevate the eye and also turn it laterally. So we can't see the superior oblique muscle very well, but it is a straight muscle that comes up, and it's weird because its tendon will actually go around a little pulley-like structure called the trochlea. This is a piece of connective tissue that it will thread through. And when it threads through, it will come in at an angle towards the eye. Over here we have the inferior oblique. We can see again it's coming in at an angle, and the rectus muscles are going to come in straight and connect at a straight angle to the eye. So what I'd like you to know for this structures is to be able to label the structures or label the muscles of the eye on this diagram and know what are the functions of those muscles. I did include the table that is in your book located here, so you'll be able to reference that as well. Right? So that concludes our lecture on the accessory structures of the eye. In the next section or next video, we're going to look at the anatomy of the eye, and that will set us up for talking about the physiology of the eye and talking about how the eye acts as an optical device. See you later, and I hope you have a wonderful day and be good to yourselves. Bye-bye.